I know you've all been looking forward to this video. It's the squat. And obviously following on nicely from the glutes video, because I did talk in the glutes YouTube video about how you can bring in more glute development with exercises such as the V squat, and how actually loading the glutes in that kind of 45-degree angle is perfect. Now, let me get onto the topic of the squat, and I'll tell you why in a second. I have this poll. A lot of people do the squat to get big legs, and granted, the squat builds big legs, but let's just remember this. Everybody is biomechanically different. I have, you got a femur here, and you got tib and fib, which is the lower portion of the leg. I am relatively balanced in that direction. So I have a femur of this length and a tib and fib pretty similar in length. So you see that? Tib and fib length, femur to hip length. They're pretty similar. Now, some very tall guys actually have very, very long femurs and shorter tib and fib. Some people actually have very, very short tib and fibs and then an average size femur. So first and foremost, I want you to think about this. When you train with somebody and you're both going to do the squat, what they lift and what you lift is very much down to the biomechanics, because to some people a squat is a very, very awkward exercise, and an exercise that just doesn't seem to work for them. For other people, they sit into a squat and their legs just blow up and they grow. So don't be disillusioned if the squat's not working for you. However, you can manipulate the exercises to suit your own biomechanics. Now, me personally will sit into a front squat very, very well. I will sit into a back squat very, very well, but both develop my glutes very, very well. So I like to try and find exercises that, especially for quad development, that take away a lot of the glute work, because I'm very, very powerful in my glutes and really, really isolate through the quads. What I'm going to do is take you through the back squat. I'm going to take you through the front squat, but before I do, I'm just going to take you through a bit of exercise mechanics. So just so you understand, in fact, this is 15 years old. This is a dowel rod that I use, and I use this when people are squatting, when we're trying to get people in optimal technique for RDLs and deadlifts, so I can actually put it along the spine, or I can show them their femur length nowadays and the tib and fib length to really just give an indication to people so they understand more about their own mechanics. But moving into the mechanics side of stuff, the squat itself is ankle, knee, and hip movement. Okay? Now, I could say to 10 people, do that, and it would look completely different. What we're looking for, especially with me having quite level-sized tib and fib and femur, is a nice 45-degree angle, the upper torso, relatively the similar sort of angle to the femur, and I'm going to get more of a balanced loading through my glutes and my quads. So you'll see that. Now I've got therefore quite a balanced loading. Now on the other hand, you've got some people that literally have to squat like this, okay? So they get very, very minimal knee bend, but they get maximal torso flexion, so a lot of hip flexion. You then get some people who technically, I'll just use this to show you for a second, have pretty short tib and fibs, and when they sit, they're almost vertical in this position here. Now, what do they all mean? Well, the more vertical you are with less hip flexion, the more knee flexion you're going to get, which is going to create a huge amount of tension in the quads. The more hip flexion you get, and the less knee flexion you get, the more of a hip exercise it's going to become. So you'll see people with big glutes, less on the quads, big erectors, big spinal erectors, and they kind of say, well, the squat doesn't work for me. Now, let's look at it from another perspective. Some people the squat works perfect for, their glutes are very strong, their spine's very strong, and the posterior chain, the glutes, develop very, very well. But it ends up looking like a good morning. If you've got somebody that has started doing the squat way too soon, way too soon into their programming, and their glutes aren't strong and they haven't built good enough spinal erectors, what tends to happen is this. They sit, they fall onto their knees, the glutes don't work, and they end up lifting through their lower back because they've not got the strength in the hips, the glutes, the hamstrings to extend through and stand up. This is a classic thing you see over and over again. People aren't ready to squat. So I just want to highlight, well, I do want to give you the variations of the squat for people that are squatting right now who can get more out of it. But please go back over my glute video. Please look at the hamstring video, and please make sure that your glutes and your hamstrings and your posterior chain are strong enough, firing, and are able to help you develop the squat properly. Because I don't want this exercise, this video to be, oh, this is what you shouldn't be doing, no one should ever squat. Guys, if you can squat, it is a phenomenal exercise, but you've got to understand how you're going to adapt your squat now to make sure that it's predominantly more hip dominant, or whether you're doing more of a quad dominant squat, and you can change that with different implements. So let me introduce you to the Watson squat ramp. Okay, this is available on the Watson Strength website. Really, really valuable tool. One of the things that happened, if you just look to the end, Gus, there, you'll see the ramp. Now, in the early days, I'd use that ramp just to do dumbbell squats with people, because I know that by raising the heels up, it changes the mechanics for a lot of people so they can squat more optimally. So I said to Watson's, could you just do me that ramp, but not attached? And we now have a few of them in the gym. We can move them around, and I'll show you how beneficial they are. If you have somebody who may have pretty long femurs, but you want to get a more of an optimal squat position for them. So let's say that their femurs are very long, and all that happens when they squat is that they bend. To get it slightly more optimal, to put less loading through the spine, we want to be able to bring their heels up, which changes and alters a bit more of the mechanics. So by putting the heels up, what we're now able to do is change a little bit of the mechanics, because we get a little bit more from the knee, and then when we come down here, you're going to find that you actually get more of an upright position and more of an optimal loading through those hinges, so the ankles, knees and hips, so a more of a mechanically advantageous position to squat in, to be able to move more load, recruit muscles a lot more optimally. So we're not finding that we're getting this flexion here where you're getting all the loading through your spine. By bringing the heels up, you're changing the mechanics so that you can actually keep that 45-degree spinal alignment and actually get a lot more loading through the glutes and the hips. So you can place a heel wedge, even for a barbell back squat, I'll show you in a second. And then this is where things get a little bit different. As I said before, the more upright somebody is and the less hip flexion there is, the more of a quad focused exercise it's going to be. The more hip flexion that you get, the more of a glute dominant exercise it's going to be. So if you've got the barbell on your back and you think immediately about breaking at the hips before you do anything else, the first port of loading is going to be hips, and then you can bring some knee flexion in. And what that'll do is it'll place tension more back towards the glutes and the hamstrings. So you'll see here, so we've got the hips and we've got the loading. Now the loading there is from the glutes, and then as you extend through, you're going to be able to get a hip dominant movement. Now, thinking about it differently, if we had the barbell on the front and we break from the knee, we've now got like a more of a knee extension rather than a hip extension. And as I talked about in the lunge video, the two dramatically change the recruitment of the muscles when you're consciously thinking about driving from a different joint. So using the heel wedge changes the mechanics to make it more optimal for the exercises you're trying to perform, allowing you to place tension more optimally on the muscles that you're trying to develop. So let's have a look at how that works and function. So remember, let me take this back a little bit. Go into the gym tonight, stand with your feet flat, look forward. First and foremost, have a look if your femur is a lot longer than your tib and fib. You will therefore be a classic flexor to start with. If you have relatively balanced femurs and tib and fib, you'll find, like me, you'll have that nice collapse of the structure 45 degrees all the way through. So I want you to go down, watch what happens. If you fall and you're very, very weak, it's not necessarily just down to structure. It could be just down to the fact that your muscles are very, very weak. Mine are a lot stronger. So every time I go down through the chain, all the muscles fire in to lock me in place. So those are the things I want you to have a look at. Then I want you to get a heel weight raise. You could just use 2 plates, 15 kg plates. Put your heels on them, put your arms out in front, and then watch what happens to the actual exercise. If you find mechanically it's a lot more comfortable, you're finding you're not flexing as much, that is more than likely a more ideal position for you to squat in. If your squat looks like mine, a lot flatter, it's more than likely that you won't need that. So let's have a look at the back squat. Okay, so elbow's going to be under the bar. Now if I want to make this a predominant hip exercise, my goal is to break at the hip, okay? My goal isn't to flex forward and turn it into a good morning, so I'm going to drive my glutes back, neutral back, squeeze through the glutes, extending through the hips and the glutes. I'm going to go drive back, hit the glutes, squeeze the glutes, and drive through the hips forward. That as a squat, my intention is placing load backwards towards my hips. Flip that over. Let's have a look at the front squat. Now remember, if when you squat from the knee, you're very, very upright, then this is going to be optimal for you without even needing a heel raise. If on the flip side, with a front squat with the bar on your back, you fall forward and it becomes hip dominant and you can't bend from the knees very well, then we drop you onto the heel raise. I'm going to use the heel raise straight away. Some people struggle with the front squat because of holding it up top. That's normally a problem if your thoracic is very, very weak. With front squats, I wouldn't go more than 8 to 10 repetitions, 8 probably at the max, because if the limiting factor is normally your upper back, then you won't be able to lift a lot of load. But if you can and you're pretty more advanced, just take this tip. If you can't, stick to things like the hat squat, leg press, etc. So I'll show you. So we put the bar up, the clavicle, we're here. Now the elbows stay forward, facing forward. Elbows are up, my heels are raised. I'm able to stay up, holding that position through my quads. Elbows stay up, and I'm going to drive from the knees. Boom. Perfect exercise for the quads. But guys, everything else I've talked about in the videos, you need strong adductors, you need strong glutes, you need strong spinal erectors. The squat's a very advanced exercise, and mechanically, if people are structurally imbalanced left and right, front and back, and they haven't moved forward, they haven't started in the right place, you're going to end up finding that the squat is more of a muscle up exercise, bouncing out of the bottom because you're not strong enough. You're not going to enjoy it. It's going to cause loads of problems. So bring it in at the right point when you've executed a lot of the stuff that I've talked about. If you're onto the squat but struggling to make improvements, here's a couple of tips. You need to get strong at the bottom. So bouncing out the bottom will not improve your squat at all. So if you're going to do your squat, you need to get strong here. You need to get very, very strong. You need to drive from the floor as opposed from just driving from the knee. So I was talking about knee and hip dominance. You still need to have a very good plantation into the floor. So if I take yourself forward, I want to drive down into the floor as hard as I can. Anyone that does this at the bottom of the squat is using momentum. So that all this bouncing out of the bottom of the squat is momentum, putting a lot of shear forces through the lumbar, all the ligaments around the base of the spine. Also, from this position being on the quads, the minute the pelvis ticks under, you're going to take the loading off the quads, it's going to shift to your lower back. It's not going to be advantageous to developing those muscles. Second thing as well, if the bar's on your back and you get to here and you round under, the loadings come off your hamstrings, it's come off the glutes, it'll hit your spine, you're going to be injured. So taking all this into consideration, you've got to pause at the bottom of the squat to get strong down there. It might not be the same load you can use up here, but start by getting very, very strong at those extremities. At the bottom, initially try and squeeze out, and then once you've got control of the muscle over time, then start to add more load. When you've got in the position where you can add more load and you can contract out of the bottom, then you add speed, and then the load keeps coming up. So think about it, guys. Think about your mechanics, your biomechanics, the exercise, the execution, all the other YouTube videos for the lower body that I've tagged together for you so that you understand everything. This is a phenomenal exercise. When you execute it right, you'll see huge developments to your legs. But if your biomechanics aren't suited to it, there's a lot of other equipment in the gym that will help you build legs. This isn't the king if you can't perform it properly.